17-year-old Clara Evans smiled, tasting the salt from the ocean breeze on her lips. It was the last happy moment she would ever have. The world was utterly perfect. Her dad had finally caved and bought her the car, not just any car, but a gleaming, canary yellow Camaro that hummed with untamed power. It was freedom, cast in steel and chrome. She cranked the radio, letting the music wash over her as she cruised down the coastal highway, the endless blue of the Pacific glittering to her right. Life didn't get better than this. She was young. She was alive. And the whole world was waiting for her. A few cars back, an off-duty police officer was nursing a lukewarm coffee, his mind already on the paperwork waiting for him at the precinct. He glanced up, barely registering the yellow sports car ahead. It was driving perfectly normally. And then, in the space of a single, horrifying heartbeat, it wasn't. The Camaro, without warning or reason, swerved violently. It shot across the lanes of oncoming traffic, a miraculous gap opening, as if by divine intervention, and then slammed head-on into a thick oak tree on the shoulder of the road. The sound was a sickening crunch of metal and shattering glass. Detective Miles Corbin arrived 20 minutes later, his face a mask of practiced indifference. He was a man made of stale coffee, sleepless nights, and too many years looking at the worst parts of humanity. He took in the scene with a jaded eye. Kid in a fast car. A tragic, but depressingly common story. Medical emergency? Texting? DUI? He grunted to a uniformed officer, already running through the checklist in his head. The initial report seemed to confirm his assumptions. The girl, Clara Evans, was alive when they pulled her from the wreckage, but unresponsive, moaning softly. There were no obvious signs of major trauma. Strangely enough, no visible blood, no grievous injuries. Just a girl who seemed to have inexplicably lost control of her car. She was rushed to the hospital, but her condition deteriorated with terrifying speed. Less than 3 hours after her dream drive had begun, Clara Evans was dead. The case should have been closed. A tragic accident. But then the coroner called, and that's when the illusion of a simple tragedy shattered. Tucked away beneath her thick blonde hair, on the back of her head, was a small, perfectly circular hole. It was so neat, so clean. It hadn't even bled. It was a bullet wound. Suddenly, Corbin's routine case became a ghost. He wasn't investigating an accident. He was hunting an unseen killer. This was a murder. A murder that made absolutely no sense. How do you shoot someone on a packed highway in broad daylight without a single witness? The officer driving behind her heard no gunshot. Forensics tore the Camaro apart, but they found no bullet holes in the car's body. The projectile had entered through the open driver's side window. A moving target inside. Another moving target. It was an impossible shot. The investigation hit a wall. And then another. And another. Clara was a good kid. A straight-A student with no known enemies. No secret life. No connection to anything that could explain this. Corbin and his team spent weeks chasing shadows. They interviewed hundreds of people, canvassed every building with a line of sight to the highway, followed up on every crackpot tip. Nothing. The frustration in the precinct was a palpable thing. It gnawed at Corbin, keeping him up at night. The file sat on his desk, mocking him with its sheer impossibility. Late one evening, long after the station had emptied out, he found himself staring at Clara's high school picture pinned to the evidence board. She was smiling. The same vibrant, full of life smile everyone described. He felt the weight of her parents' silent, Tear-filled pleas for answers. The press had started calling it the ghost bullet of Port Blossom, and his captain was making noises about reallocating resources. It felt like a personal failure, just as the case was about to be relegated to the cold case files, a testament to a perfect, unsolvable crime. Corbin made one last desperate gambit. "I want to recanvass a 2-block radius from the crash site," he announced, ignoring the weary groans from his team. "Every business, every house. Talk to everyone again. We missed something." It was a hunch born of pure stubbornness, and it led them to a grimy, forgotten gas station nestled just off the highway. A relic from another era. Behind the counter was a man who seemed just as faded as the building, Arthur Finch. He was a quiet, lonely old man with watery eyes and hands that trembled slightly. He seemed harmless. A man living out the twilight of a quiet, regretful life. Corbin began the interview with routine questions, building a gentle rapport. "What were you doing on the morning of the 7th of July, Mr. Finch?" Arthur's memory was hazy. He talked about his slow morning, about the few customers he'd had. He seemed to have nothing to offer. He was just another dead end. But Corbin persisted, gently prodding. "Did you leave the station at all that morning, Arthur?" A flicker of something crossed the old man's face. Yes. For a little while. Business was slow. I went down to the water's edge. To the pier." "What were you doing on the pier?" Corbin asked, his voice still casual, masking the sudden alertness that shot through him. "Nothing. Really?" Arthur mumbled, looking down at his hands. "Just plinking. With my old .22 rifle. I'd a can." The air in the small office grew thick. Corbin leaned forward, his voice dropping. "A can, Arthur? A can in the water?" "Yes," Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. "Just passing the time." "What time was this, Arthur?" "I don't know. Maybe around 8:30? 9? Corbin felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He kept his face a blank canvas, but his mind was racing. He asked Arthur where on the pier he was standing, which direction he was firing. As the old man described the scene, the glint of the sun on the water, the tin can bobbing on the gentle waves, his voice began to falter. Corbin didn't need to connect the dots for him. The horror began to dawn on Arthur's face. A slow, sickening wave of comprehension. He looked up at Corbin, his watery eyes wide, with a terror that was beyond guilt. It was the terror of a man realizing he was a monster by accident. I missed," he stammered, the words catching in his throat. "The bullet. It hit the water. I saw the splash. It just hit the water." His breathing became ragged. The truth, an impossible, monstrous thing, was assembling itself in his mind. The angle from the pier to the water, the elevated highway just beyond, the open window of a passing car, a fluke of physics, a ricochet. He could see it now. A horrifying slow-motion replay in his head, the crack of the rifle, the bullet skipping off the water's surface like a stone, arcing up into the bright morning sky. A tiny messenger of death on an impossible trajectory. "Oh, God," Arthur Finch choked out, the sound a strangled sob. His body began to shake uncontrollably as the full, soul-crushing weight of what he had done crashed down upon him. He wasn't a murderer. He was just a lonely old man who had been shooting at a can. But his stray bullet, by someone in a billion chance, had traveled across the water, climbed into the sky, and found Clara Evans, ending her perfect day and her perfect life. Tears streamed down his face as he confessed everything, not as a killer, but as a man shattered by the horrific consequence of a single, careless moment. Detective Corbin closes the file on Clara Evans, labeling it a tragic, solved accident. He looks out his window at the sprawling city of Port Blossom. He mutters, "A 1 in a billion shot. This city." His voice trails off. The scene fades from his downtown office to a flickering neon sign of a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, where a different kind of act of God is about to unfold. While Detective Corbin was closing the file on what he believed was a tragic accident, miles away in the seedier part of Port Blossom, a young man named Leo was running for his life, desperately searching for a savior. He found Brother Jonah. "Come in, my son," Brother Jonah said, his voice a soothing balm. "God has led you here. You are safe now." For a terrified young man named Leo, it was a promise of salvation. It was also a lie that would cost him his soul. Leo stumbled into the motel room, his breath coming in ragged gasps. For 3 days, he had been living on adrenaline and fear, convinced that every shadow held a threat. Every passing car, a hunter. The city's underbelly had chewed him up and spit him out, leaving him paranoid and hunted by enemies both real and imagined. He'd made a stupid mistake, a small-time drug deal where he'd thought he could skim a little off the top. But the man he'd cheated wasn't small-time, and his face, contorted in a mask of cold fury, was burned into Leo's memory. Now, that face was everywhere, in the reflection of a shop window, in the posture of a stranger across the street. He was being hunted. He knew it. The small, sterile room, with its neatly made bed and the scent of bleach, felt like a cathedral. And Brother Jonah, with his calm eyes and beatific smile, seemed like an angel. "You are trembling," Jonah observed, his voice dripping with compassion. He guided Leo to a chair. "The world is a frightening place, full of darkness. But here, in this room, there is only light." Jonah looked at him, not with pity, but with a deep, unsettling understanding. "You carry a heavy burden, my son. The weight of poor choices. It chases you, doesn't it? It whispers your name in the dark." Leo could only nod, stunned that this stranger could see right through him. The only thing that seemed out of place was the music. A small speaker in the corner of the room was blasting gospel music at a volume that seemed designed to rattle the thin walls. It was a constant, almost aggressive wave of sound hymns and hallelujahs that were less about praise and more about sonic warfare. But Leo was too exhausted to question it. The noise was a shield, a wall of sound that kept the terrors of the outside world at bay. It felt safe. Brother Jonah handed him a worn Bible. "The Lord's work is the only true shield," he said, his gaze intense, almost hypnotic. They began to read. At first, Leo's mind was too scattered to focus. But Jonah's voice was a steady, rhythmic current, pulling him under. The preacher's interpretation of the scriptures was unusual. He spoke of cleansing the world of sin, of the necessity of sacrifice to achieve true purity. He landed on a passage about pruning dead branches from a vine so the plant could thrive. "You see, Leo?" Jonah leaned in, his eyes gleaming. "The world is a garden, choked with weeds, unholy things, weak things. To make the garden beautiful, the dead branches must be cut away. It is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of love, an act of purification. He talked about the ultimate human sacrifice, not as a historical event, but as an ongoing spiritual necessity. It was all metaphorical. Of course, wasn't it? Leo, caught in the undertow of Jonah's charisma and his own desperation, found himself nodding along. The cheap motel room began to feel like a crucible, a place where his soul was being tested and purified. The click of the deadbolt Jonah had engaged earlier no longer felt like a measure of safety. It felt like the ceiling of a tomb. As night fell, the brief comfort Leo had found evaporated, replaced by a tidal wave of primal fear. The thought of stepping back into the neon-lit darkness, of facing the phantoms that hunted him, was more than he could bear. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Please. Can I stay here tonight? I can't go back out there. They'll find me." And Brother Jonah's smile was one of pure, benevolent understanding. "Of course, my child," he said warmly. "Rest. The shepherd never abandons his flock." End of quote. Relief washed over Leo so completely that he nearly collapsed. Jonah prepared a makeshift bed on the floor with a spare blanket and pillow. Leo lay down, the thumping bass of the gospel music a strange lullaby. And for the first time in days, he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He never saw the shepherd's transformation. As Leo's breathing evened out, the benevolent smile on Brother Jonah's face melted away, replaced by an expression of serene, chilling purpose. He moved about the room with a practiced, silente efficiency. There was no rage in his movements, no madness in his eyes, only a profound and terrifying certainty. He was a false prophet, and this was his sacred duty. He retrieved a long, thin knife from a hidden compartment in his suitcase. He knelt beside the sleeping form on the floor, the relentless gospel music swelling around them. This was not murder. In his twisted mind, it was a holy act, a human sacrifice to appease a demanding God. After the act was done, Jonah worked with the same chilling calm, cleaning his instrument, his hands steady as a surgeon's. The music played on, a soundtrack for an unspeakable horror. For the next 5 days, the music never stopped. It poured from room 112 of the Starlight Motel, a constant, deafening him, other residents, transient souls, in a place of last resort, complained to the owner about the noise. But Jonah was a long-term tenant who always paid in cash and never caused any other trouble. The owner couldn't be bothered. He just turned up the television in his own office. He didn't notice that over those 5 days, 2 other desperate-looking women, drawn in by the same promise of sanctuary, entered room 112. And, like Leo, they never came out. On the morning of the 5th day, a figure emerged from the room, clad head to toe in a white hazmat suit, carrying several heavy pieces of luggage. The figure got into a car and drove away. 45 minutes later, the call came in. A raging dumpster fire in a quiet residential neighborhood. The first firefighters on the scene thought it was just trash. But as the flames died down and the thick, acrid smoke cleared, one of them prodded the smoldering debris with a hook. He saw something pale amidst the black. A hand. They all backed away, the casual professionalism of their job evaporating in a wave of nausea and horror. This wasn't a trash fire. It was a funeral pyre. The investigation quickly led them back to the Starlight Motel, to the room with the blaring gospel music. The room that was now empty, scrubbed clean with bleach. but unable to hide the truth of the horror that had occurred there. The stench was unbearable. Amidst the charred debris were the unmistakable shapes of human remains. Not one body, but three, dismembered and burned beyond recognition. During his police interrogation, Brother Jonah was unrepentant and smiling. "You think I am an aberration?" He scoffed at the detectives. "My work is messy, I admit. But my brother, Dr. Alistair Finch, he is a true artist. His methods are so much cleaner. He purifies the world without spilling a single drop of blood." The detectives exchanged a shocked look. The name Finch hangs in the air. The poison in the air. The name echoed in the sterile interrogation room. Finch. It was a name associated with healing, with prestige, with the quiet, manicured suburbs of Port Blossom. Dr. Alistair Finch was one of the city's most respected men, a pillar of the community. No one could imagine he was connected to the bloody, fanatical horror of his brother's crimes, unless they had been inside his home gym the night before his family died. Dr. Alistair Finch watched his daughter, Lily, doing her homework and felt a swell of what looked like fatherly love. "You're staying home to study tomorrow," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He was protecting her, but not from the world. He was protecting her from the trap he was setting for her mother. The Finch home was a portrait of success. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of furniture was perfectly placed. It was a house of order, precision, and control, a perfect reflection of its master. Alistair moved through his home not with comfort, but with the critical eye of a curator, straightening a picture frame, adjusting a cushion. He was a brilliant anesthesiologist, a man praised for his steady hands and his cool demeanor in the face of life and death decisions. That same chilling detachment permeated the walls of his own house. The silence in the Finch home was a physical presence, broken only by the carefully modulated tones of a family that had learned not to make waves. To Alistair, his family was not a source of chaotic joy, but another facet of his reputation to be managed. His wife, once a vibrant socialite, had become an unwelcome variable. His daughter, a brilliant extension of his own legacy, was something to be molded and protected. The tension began in the home gym. It was a subtle thing, a moment so strange that Lily almost dismissed it. She'd gone down for a late-night workout and found her father there, which was unusual in itself. He wasn't on the treadmill or lifting weights. He was kneeling on the floor, his focus entirely on a bright yellow yoga ball. Beside him on a towel were two small rubber plugs and a compact metal canister with no markings. He wasn't exercising. He was assembling something, his movements as meticulous and sterile as if he were preparing for surgery. "Dad, what are you doing?" Lily had asked, startling him. He looked up, and for a split second, his face was a blank mask before the familiar, slightly condescending smile slid into place. "Just a little experiment, dear. Trying to see if I can adjust the pressure for better lumbar support. Tennis has been murder on my back." He casually swept the plugs into his pocket and set the canister aside. The explanation was plausible enough, but the intensity in his eyes, the almost scientific precision of his actions, it felt wrong. It was the first inkling that something in their perfect house was deeply, profoundly amiss. The next day, at the breakfast table, the oppressive silence was broken by Alistair's decree. "Lily, you have the day off from school. I believe you'll spend it here, in your room, studying for your exams." Lily's face fell. "But Dad, Sarah and I were going to go to the beach." Sarah can wait, Alistair said, not looking up from his newspaper. Your physics midterm cannot. There will be no arguments. His voice was flat. Final. His wife, Eleonora, a woman whose warmth was the only thing that kept the house from feeling like a museum, interjected softly. Alistair. Darling. She's a teenager. A few hours of sunshine won't derail her future. And Alistair slowly lowered his paper and fixed his wife with a look of cold disappointment. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The look was enough. It was a silent, chilling reminder of who was in control. Eleonora fell silent, her defiance extinguished. This was his veiled, twisted attempt to save his daughter. After Alistair left for the hospital, kissing his wife and daughter with a dry, passionless peck on the cheek, Eleonora turned to Lily with a conspiratorial smile. Your father is a brilliant man, but he doesn't understand that a soul needs sunshine. I will not have you locked away on such a beautiful day. Let's go shopping. That act of maternal defiance, an attempt to bring a small spark of joy into her daughter's regimented life, sealed their fate. It was a beautiful family tragedy, set in motion by a mother's love. They laughed on the way to the mall, singing along badly to the radio, in Eleonora's cheerful yellow Mini Cooper. The car was a bubble of warmth and freedom, a stark contrast to the cold austerity of their home. For a little while, they were just a mother and daughter, happy and carefree. Then, as they sat in traffic, Eleonora mentioned a slight headache. Lily, engrossed in a text from a friend, just murmured in sympathy. A few minutes later, she felt it too. A strange, creeping drowsiness. She yawned, her eyelids suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. Mom, I'm so tired all of a sudden, she mumbled, her words slurring slightly. Eleonora just nodded, her head lolling against the headrest. The world outside the car windows began to swim, the vibrant colors blurring into a soft, inviting haze. The horror was not loud or violent. It was a slow, silent, and terrifying fade to black. An invisible monster filling the small car. The carbon monoxide was doing its work. A jogger found the car 2 hours later, parked awkwardly by the side of the road, its engine still humming softly. He peered inside, annoyed at first, then concerned. 2 women, slumped in their seats as if sleeping. He knocked on the window. Nothing. He banged harder, his concern turning to panic. They didn't move. The police were baffled. There were no signs of foul play. No drugs. No note. Just 2 healthy people, Eleonora and Lily, dead from apparent asphyxiation, in a perfectly functioning car. The initial detective interviewed a devastated Dr. Finch, who performed the role of grieving husband and father flawlessly. He was the picture of tragic composure, even offering his medical expertise. It could be a rare congenital heart defect, he suggested to the detectives, his voice heavy with sorrow. Sometimes they present with no prior symptoms. It's devastating. He expertly guided them down a dozen different rabbit holes of medical anomalies, all of which led nowhere. He was the perfect witness, a man so helpful and heartbroken that no one thought to look closer. For 6 agonizing months, the investigation went nowhere. It was, for all intents and purposes, the perfect murder. The case went cold. A statistical anomaly. A family tragedy without a cause. Then, a new detective, unwilling to let the file gather dust, ordered a complete re-examination of every piece of evidence. His team went back to the car, cataloging every item one last time. In the trunk, they found the deflated yellow yoga ball, initially dismissed as simple exercise equipment. On a whim, driven by the sheer lack of any other leads, the detective sent it to the lab. Test the air inside, he ordered, feeling foolish as he said it. The lab results came back, and the case exploded back to life. The air inside the yoga ball contained a lethal, industrial-grade concentration of pure carbon monoxide. The pieces snapped together with a horrifying clarity. The strange scene in the gym, the brilliant anesthesiologist with access to compressed gases, the experiment. It was a murder weapon of chilling ingenuity. Dr. Alistair Finch was arrested. He remained silent, his face an emotionless mask, offering no motivi, no confession. Back in his office, Detective Corbin placed the thick case file for the Finch family murder next to the much thinner file for Clara Evans' death. He stared at the two names of the perpetrators, written in his own hand: Arthur Finch, Alistair Finch. Finch, he whispered to the empty room, the connection finally clicking into place like a lock. It can't be a coincidence. The echoes in the fog. It couldn't be a coincidence. Corbin knew it in his gut. Staring at the two case files side by side on his cluttered desk. The same last name, linking two impossibly different tragedies. A stray bullet, a holy sacrifice, a perfect poison. Three shadows cast by one family name. Was this a coincidence? Or was this the dark soul of Port Blossom itself? The cases were closed, the perpetrators identified. But for Detective Corbin, the story wasn't over. It had simply coalesced into a series of unsettling questions about the very nature of evil. He was left staring into an abyss that had three distinct faces, all tied together by the name Finch. First, there was Arthur Finch, the man who killed by accident and was consumed by a guilt so profound it shattered him. His was an evil born of loneliness and carelessness, a stray bullet fired from a place of quiet desperation. He was a monster by happenstance, a tragic figure whose single, thoughtless act had catastrophic consequences. He represented chaos, the horrifying, random cruelty of a world where a perfect morning could be ended by a 1 in a billion ricochet. Then there was his brother, Dr. Alistair Finch, the opposite side of the coin. Where Arthur was chaotic, Alistair was precise. Where Arthur was consumed by guilt, Alistair felt nothing. He was a monster by design, a man of intellect and control, who used his brilliance not to heal, but to kill. His evil was cold, calculated, and born of a chilling narcissism. He didn't use a bullet, he used his knowledge, weaponizing the very air his family breathed. He was the embodiment of order twisted into a malignant force. And between them, a ghost in the machine, the fanatical killer who called himself Brother Jonah. He had mentioned a brother, a cleaner artist of death. The timeline fit, the name fit. Yet, no concrete link between Jonah and the Finch brothers was ever officially established. Was he a cousin, a lost relative, or something else entirely? A disciple drawn to their shared darkness? His true relationship to them remains one of Port Blossom's many city of secrets, making his brand of holy terror all the more disturbing. 3 men, 1 name, 3 different flavors of darkness, an accident, Saplon, and a crusade. Corbin realized he wasn't just investigating crimes, he was mapping a sickness. And the sickness wasn't just in the Finch family, it was in the city itself. Port Blossom, with its salty fog that rolled in to blur the lines between right and wrong. A city of forgotten gas stations on lonely piers, of seedy motels that offered sanctuary to the desperate, and of pristine suburban homes with perfect lawns that hid the most monstrous of secrets. The city was the fertile ground where these different seeds of evil could sprout and grow. It was the final, silent accomplice in every tragedy. Detective Corbin solved the cases, but he never truly understood the darkness. How could he? The shadows of Port Blossom are long, and they hide many secrets, leaving a lasting impact on all who dwell within them. Look around. How well do you really know the city you live in? How many tragedies are just waiting for the right moment, the right family to bloom?